Okay, now we go on to part two. And if you're coming into this and don't know of a part one, go to the very last few seconds of this and click in your top right hand corner, and that'll go to part one. And from now on, at the end of each part, in the top left hand corner will be the next part, i.e., this is part two and part three, and so on. I believe it'll at least go to part three. But let's see what we can do to this. In 1822, the American Colonization Society, that ACS we were talking about, began sending black volunteers to the Pepper Coast, the closest point of Africa and therefore the least expensive to reach. That's not true. To establish a colony for freed blacks. Actually, they took it over. It was, looking at it here, you can tell that it would be closer the farther and farther up here and around the corner that you get. But they had actually taken over this whole area to bring back to freed blacks, and it was cool and chill off of it. And of course, they got Liberia Bay there. But if you look, there's Monrovia. It's named after James Monroe, and then Bassa Cove, where the Bassa people are. But they call this place Edina. They have Pennsylvania Colony set up there, and so these are trade towns. In fact, they have one called Trade Town. Mississippi Colony, Louisiana Colony, Crew Towns, Maryland Colony, Cape Palms or Palmas. So there are different areas there, and a lot of them are set up running off of each little river that runs out off of it. So river valleys, as a Caucasian way, in pretty much most every way. But and so by 1867, the ACS and state-related chapters had assisted in the migration of more than 13,000 blacks to Liberia, and by assisted mean pay their whole way and everything to get them back home. These free African, it's still available to people today, and this is the year of return, so you can go back at any time. There's a lot of places over there from this area and Guinea and Ghana and all kinds of places that are welcoming people back to Africa, so you don't have to be under so much oppression and everything, or feel such the inferiority complex or the problems that comes along with it, and so on, or subject America to it itself. These free African Americans and their descendants married within their community and came to identify as Americo-Liberians. Many were of mixed race and educated in American culture. All right. They did not identify with the indigenous native of the tribes they encountered. Oh no. They intermarried largely within the colonial community, developing an ethnic group that had a cultural tradition infused with American notions of political republicanism and Protestant Christianity. The white Caucasian God of the Jewish slave master's Bible. Well, okay, but they didn't do well with the natives. They put it that simply, but they didn't get along with them. They considered now check this out, this is kind of in a realistic standpoint. At this point, a lot of them had only been in the Americas for a generation or two, and could have been as many as 8 or so, but it would have, a lot of people, some of them not even a full generation. There were people that had come over and then be able to go back just 7 years and so on. But whenever they went back to people that were like what they were just before, they considered them now to be inferior to them, and they enslaved them and gave them no rights and started taking them over and things, and oh man, all kinds of atrocities were said about and everything. And a lot of these people were literate, so there's even some writings about it, and they talk about how they're savages and things like that. And it's crazy to think that a black person just a couple of generations out would turn back at its own people and what level they used to be in, and would say something like that. But you also have to realize that since the time they've been gone, it's at least done some type of step up a little bit too, and the people's knowledge and awareness too. So yeah, it shows you the big jump of having been around the Americans, and then the change and how they didn't like it so much. But here's an important factor: is the ACS, supported by prominent American politicians such as Abraham Lincoln, Henry Clay, and James Monroe, who Monroeville is named after, believed repatriation of free African Americans was preferable to widespread emancipation of slaves. So it's not what he wanted to do in any way. He said whenever he did it, he was trying to screw up the South, so they went into a helter-skelter mode, and then he could start attacking him and probably take advantage of him because it wasn't going to be easy. And no, it wasn't be easy, but thousands and thousands of Americans died, Caucasians died trying to free black slaves, but yet that's not what the war was even about. It was a byproduct of it, and it became an extreme issue because of that. But Abraham Lincoln even said after the war was over that they were to be repatriated back, and Liberia was set up for it in the whole 9 yards. Somebody popped him in the back of the head and stuff, and then that didn't really happen anymore after that, did it? Similar state-based organizations established colonies in Mississippi and Africa, or the Republic of Maryland, which Liberia later annexed, and I showed you all the names down there. They only mentioned 2. The American Liberian settlers did not relate well to the indigenous people they encountered, as I mentioned, especially those in communities of the more isolated bush. So the non-westernized areas already they weren't going to get along with, which is pretty much what they were just not long ago. They knew nothing of their cultures, languages, or animist religion. And they were not interested in learning. They wanted the white Caucasian Bible and white Caucasian God that doesn't mention black people but had adopted it. The colonial settlements were raided by the Kru and Grebo from their inland chiefdoms. Encounters with tribal Africans in the bush often became more violent confrontations. And another people look at it another way, where they would take and enslave them and stuff. And they're not going to mention that, but they did already a couple of times, kind of, and then allude to it. But then right there, kind of make it seem not so much, and that it was the savages' fault, wasn't it? I don't mean the ones in new clothes. I mean the ones in old clothes that hadn't been in America for a little while. In the book Slaves to Racism, An Unbroken Chain from America to Liberia, Benjamin Dennis and Anita Dennis argue that the Americo-Liberians only replicated the only society most of them only knew, the racist culture of the American South, not realizing at this point that blacks were still enslaving blacks at this point, and it was the reason they were captured in the first place, and it was going on before even Islamic slave trade got there, for it really is their way. In fact, there are more slaves today in South Africa enslaved by other blacks than there ever were in North America at any one time, and there's a lot in Libya and areas too. So cheap too, hey, but they don't care about that. White man bad America, not South America, not Islam, anything. White man bad that set them all up, but white man bad, huh? Yep, white man bad. So believing themselves different from and culturally and educationally superior to the indigenous peoples, now the American Liberians developed as an elite minority that held on to political power. We are smarts now, see, and then we're no longer primitives, we're better than you. Of course, whenever that kind of happened with the white people, oh, that's just incredibly bad. Well, here's your black people, and they went back with the power to Wakanda. And what happened? Just checking. And no, it's not a one-time deal, and no, it didn't go on for a weekend in any way, shape, or form for the cannibal warlords we hear about modern day and things that have gone on there. But we'll get to more of that later. But anyhow, they did that, and they held on to power, and they was kings over it. They treated the natives the way American whites had treated them, as inferiors. The natives could not vote and could not speak unless spoken to. Just as American blacks were prohibited from marrying or having sexual relationships with white women, the natives could not marry American Liberian women. So they were like, no, you're not going to marry back into people that probably have the same genetics as them, but they're definitely have a high on the horse thing because Caucasians had spent a little time domesticating them. Isn't that amazing and transparent? Even when some of the natives became educated, they were excluded from government positions except for a token few. Boy, that sounds like right after the blacks were freed, but then there got to be a bunch of people that we can name that were around and representatives that we gave them. Sounds like not even as good, but they were trying to mock American society, but they did it in a different bad way, and not in a, hey, let's do it better than that, let's not da da da. They, da da da. Indigenous tribesmen did not enjoy birthright citizenship in their own land until 1904. Okay. American Liberians encouraged religious organizations to set up missions in school to educate the indigenous people. And we talked about that and how a lot of the missions didn't do real well, and some people got hurt, and some people did something somewhere. On July 26, 1847, the settlers issued a Declaration of Independence and promulgated a constitution, but it was based on the political principles of the United States Constitution, and it established the independent Republic of Liberia. The United Kingdom was the first country to recognize Liberia's independence. The United States didn't recognize Liberia until 1962, after the southern states, who had significant influence on the American government, seceded from the Union to form the Confederacy. And then this is the trigger point, right? So there we go. The leadership of the new nation consisted largely of the American Liberians, who initially established political and economic dominance in the coastal areas that the ACS had purchased. So this is where all this came from. They maintained relations with U.S. contacts in developing these areas and resulting trades. So they really assisted them a lot. Their passage of the 1865 Ports of Entry Act prohibited foreign commerce with the inland tribes. Oh no. Ostensibly to encourage the growth of civilized values before such trade was allowed in the region. So they were going to make them get civilized before they were going to let them trade. Boy, that sounds discriminative and stuff. And Jim Crow sounds so great compared to that. And yeah, and you get to have Caucasian things around you and horseless carriages and stuff and electricity and all kinds of things happening. So isn't that amazing? So this area that they purchased, the passage of that act or whatever, is meant to encourage it. But by 1877, the true Whig Party was the country's most powerful political entity, and that's strange. That's the Caucasian people that powder themselves and put on the white wigs that sometimes you see George Washington with and so on. So you can see blacks wearing a Caucasian wig with a thing on it. Well, maybe today it's a lot easier because a lot of black women wear Caucasian mimicking hair hats and stuff, but see a black man with a hairdo that looked like George Washington and stuff, it's a little comical, but let's go. It was made up of primarily the Americo-Liberians, who maintained social and economic and political dominance well into the 20th century, repeating patterns of European colonists and other nations in Africa. Competition for office was usually contained within the party. A party nomination virtually ensured election. Okay. And they talk about, there's other places that they'll go into a lot of the corruption in all of this, but they'll only allude to some of it a little bit later. Pressure from the United Kingdom, which controlled Sierra Leone to the northwest, and France, with its interest in the north and east, led to the loss of Liberia's claims to extensive territories. Both Sierra Leone and the Ivory Coast annexed territories, and Liberia struggled to attract investment to develop infrastructure and larger industrial economy, mainly because of what they had done and the way they were being and stuff, and it really had gotten out of hand, and just like right off the bat necessarily. And so it took a southern turn and it went south. There was a decline in production of Liberian goods in the late 19th century, and the government struggled financially, resulting in indebtedness on a series of international loans. On July 16, 1892, Martha Ann Erskine Ricks actually met Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle and presented her with a handmade quilt, Liberia's first diplomatic gift to anybody or to the aristocracy. Born into slavery in Tennessee, Rick said, "I had heard often from the time I was a child how good the Queen had been to my people, to slaves, and how she wanted us to be free." But this is 1892, and I'm sure at this point she had heard about how a lot of Americans wanted blacks to be free and go back to Africa and try to mimic what they had seen and do it on their own. And they were good people, and they freed the slaves. But there was a lot involved in Europe and England too with the whole thing, and it's not a big um, flower garden for just about anybody involved, including the blacks themselves, for they were the enablers. You know, they were the one catching and selling their own kind off for beads and alcohol or less, and several things, but for trade, really, in a lot of cases. Um, So in the early 20th century, American and other international interests emphasized resource extraction, with rubber production a major industry into the earliest 20th century. Well, yeah, we started having tires, and it really kind of was off bicycle tires in some of the original uses. And then to put them on carriages, and it really softened it and everything, that became a great use and started finding millions of uses over time. But at first, that and tires. So one of the biggest investors in Liberia was one of the great tire companies. It wasn't Goodyear, it was one of the other ones. It was Firestone. Firestone actually invested heavily in them, and I think is still the largest actual plant that they have there. I think it's in Moreau, and the largest actual plant that they do have there in any way or something on it. So pretty neat. In 1914, Imperial Germany accounted for 3/4 of the trade of Liberia. Now I want you to keep that in mind as you find out what they do to Germany, that's their largest trader. Um, This was cause for concern among the British colonial authorities of Sierra Leone and the French colonial authorities of French Guiana, or Guinea, and the Ivory Coast, as tensions with Germany increased. Huh. First World War. Liberia remained neutral during the World War I until August of 1917, when it declared war on Germany in 19... what? Yeah, so see, flip-flop real quick there on your 3/4 of the thing. This caused them a big problem, but so they caused their own problem, but and never mind. In 1919, Liberia attended the Versailles Peace Conference, and Liberia was one of the founding members of the League of Nations when it was founded in January of 1920, and then also in the New World Order in 1945. But in the middle 20th century, 1929, allegations of modern slavery in Liberia led the League of Nations to establish the Christie Commission. This was designed to see how bad this was and how deep it went, and also how long it had gone on. And this man is going to really minimize the truth. Let me continue. Findings included government involved in widespread forced or compulsory labor. Minority ethnic groups especially were exploited in a system that enriched well-connected elites. As a result of the report, President Charles D.B. King and Vice President Allen N. Yancey resigned. Oh no, it's much worse than that. It wasn't like, oh, there might be a scandal here. No. In the mid 20th century, Liberia gradually began to modernize with American assistance, as indeed any place in Africa that's gotten past a certain point, every point they reach is a hard fought battle, and millions of dollars are spent from multiple Caucasian countries. So it built the Freeport of Monrovia and Roberts International Airport. So that's where that came from, under the Lease-Lynn program before its entry into the Second World War. That's a program that was, to where Roosevelt, basically they were giving millions to all kinds of different people to try to ensure that they weren't going to get cut off preemptive and into the war, and have enough resources to do a bunch of stuff at one time, getting in more iron, more rubber, more this, more that, everything. After the war, President William Tubman of there encouraged the foreign investment into the country. Liberia had the second highest rate of economic growth in the world during the 1950s. And that sounds like a great boon, and it really is. But that's because for many decades before that, they had been downtrodden in the way, and then all of a sudden given a moment of freedom. And it didn't last too long, because as the 50s waned out, other things happened that are coming up shortly. Liberia also began to take a more active role in international affairs. It was a founding member of the United Nations, as I just said a minute ago, in 1945, and became a vocal critic of the South African apartheid regime. So they started saying that it's bad for them to separate themselves from the other ones. And that's kind of odd, because even though they were the same race primarily, and even some of the same people, they had just up until a couple of decades before been definitely separating themselves. So this could be one of those holier than thou moments, but literally the people in South Africa that are showing up were Bantus, and had pushed through and abused the Khoisan extremely bad. And in the process, pardon me, on the process saw something real neat, like the Wizard of Oz town, there. And of course it was built by Caucasians, and they had been there for a long time before anybody really started showing up. And they started showing up now at a fence that finally got built to protect them from the problems that were happening. And God knows why it ever got changed from that idea, from recent primitives with new clothes on begging at a fence, to, yeah, come on in, oh my God, you're raping and killing everybody, and now you've took over. And oh, have you ever watched that guy talk in Malema and things? It's wow. But see, they don't think wow. They think, oh wow, we're finally driving the car, and it's like, oh man, my God, it's been a real problem. But that's a totally different issue than Liberia on the other side of the continent, just like Egypt, which has nothing to do with this side of the continent too. So that connection is definitely not there in any way, shape, or form. Liberia also began to take a more active role in international affairs, and it was a founding member of the UN, as it says. But Liberia also served as a proponent of both African independence from European colonial powers, which are still kind of going on there, and of Pan-Africanism. This is where they were all going to try to become one, and it's not happened in any way. In fact, at any time they've really tried to do this, it caused an internal war between them and stuff. It's really caused a huge problem, and then one always oppresses the other one in everything. And yeah, so it doesn't matter if it's white or black. It's just going to be that way with these people here. Straight up. In America, lighter skinned blacks discriminate against darker skinned blacks, believe it or not. Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where they're doing a lot of bleaching and things like that. So now we're going on to late 20th century political instability. On April 12, 1980, a military coup led by Master Sergeant Samuel Doe, and so this is the cannibalistic warlord people, of the Kron ethnic group, overthrew and killed President William R. Tolbert Jr., and Doe and other plotters later executed a majority of Tolbert's cabinet and other Americo-Liberian government officials and true Whig Party members, and said that they had eaten his heart and done all these things and strung him up and just really, yeah, gave it that whole we're civilized look. And coup leaders formed the People's Redemption Council, redemption song, to govern the country. A strategic Cold War ally of the West, Doe received significant financial backing from the United States. While critics condemned the PRC for corruption and political repression. Oops. So what the hell? Go ahead and fund these guys. Somebody take it over and do something good with it. I reckon after Liberia adopted a new constitution in 1985, Doe was elected as president in subsequent elections that were internationally condemned as fraudulent. Oh no. Little Brian. On November 12, 1985, a failed counter-coup was launched by Thomas Gwinopka, whose soldiers briefly occupied the national radio station. Government regression intensified in response as Doe's troops retaliated by executing members of the Gio and Mano ethnic groups in Namba County. And they said that they were killing babies and drinking the blood before they go into battle, and it was their sacred protective thing and all kinds of voodoo things. It's incredible. There are videos about it. You can just try to look it up. Look up General Butt Naked, and he'll tell you all about it. I swear, this is a guy's name, General Butt Naked. Oh, they've taken fun names. Really, yeah. But they used to actually fight back to Butt Naked. Yeah, they weren't wearing fatigues or doing things or doing that Caucasian type thing. All the way back to Butt Naked. The National Patriotic Front of Liberia, the NPFL, a rebel group led by Charles Taylor, launched an insurrection in December 1989 against Doe's government with the backing of neighboring countries such as Burkina Faso and the Ivory Coast. This triggered the First Liberian Civil War. By September 1990, Doe's forces controlled only a small area just outside the capital, and Doe was captured and executed in that month by rebel forces. And is that General Butt Naked? The rebels soon split into various factions fighting one another. The Economic Community Monitoring Group, under the Economic Community of West African States, organized a military task force to intervene in the crisis. From 1989 to 1986, more than 200,000 Liberians died and 1 million others were displaced into refugee camps in the neighboring countries. Oh no. A peace deal between warring parties was reached in 1995, finally leading to Taylor's election as president in 1997. Oh, it's not over yet. Under Taylor's leadership, Liberia became internationally known as a pariah state due to its use of blood diamonds and illegal timber exports to fund the Revolutionary United Front in the Sierra Leone Civil War. Oh no. The Second Liberian Civil War began then. Oh, so it just can't get their crap together. In 1999, when Liberians united for reconciliation and democracy. Funny how they use the same names and little keywords and stuff. You know, it's like saying black Hebrew Israelites. Couldn't come up with something better, a religion better? No, we like yours, but we're going to say it's us. That's good. In March 2003, a second rebel group, Movement for Democracy in Liberia, began launching attacks against Taylor from the southeast. Peace talks between the factions began in Accra in June of that year, and Taylor was indicted by the Special Court for Sierra Leone for crimes against humanity for that same month, and I can't list them for you, for they'll knock my video. By July 2003, the rebels had launched the assault on Monrovia under heavy pressure from the international community and the Domestic Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace movement. Taylor resigned in August 2003 and went into exile in Nigeria. A peace deal was signed later that month. The United Nations mission in Liberia began in September 2003 to provide security and monitor the peace accord, and an interim government took power following in the following October. I'm sorry. Oh, and it's not over yet. The subsequent 2005 elections were internationally regarded as the most free and fair in Liberian history. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a Harvard-educated economist and former Minister of Finance, was selected as the first female president in Africa. Hey, she's got something going on, but what happens later? Oh, stay tuned. Upon her inauguration, Sirleaf requested the extradition of Taylor from Nigeria and transferred him to the SLCL for the trial of Hague. So she tried to get him for his war crimes and things. In 2006, the government established a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for this purpose, to address the causes and crimes that there were in the Civil War. Now, we're not going to really go over geography here, but it contains from tropical rainforest, and then they cover the hills, elephant grass, deciduous forest, all types of things. It has 2 rainy seasons with a slight gap in the middle of it, and a gap at winter, of course, too. And it's bounded by the Kavala River, and I've already shown you a picture of it in part 1 and where exactly it contains. If we look at the pink thing over here at the side right now, this is the shape of it and where it contains, and 10 is the area that borders the Kavala River and so on. So there's a lot of little sub-counties, if you will, in the country, but they're pretty good size. Some of them are quite huge. Liberia is divided into 15 counties, which in turn are subdivided in a total of 90 districts and further subdivided into clans. So it's still tribal. The oldest countries are Grand Bassa and Monasaro, both founded in 1839 prior to Liberian independence, but after the help setup. Gurbapalo is the newest country in 2001. Nimba is the largest of the countries at almost 4,500 square miles, while Montserrat is the smallest at about 1,900. But Montserrat is also the most populous country with over 1,100,000 residents as far as 2018. And so here we can see the dates on the right, and they go all the way from back early 1800s, but 1964, 1984, and so on. And so you can see that they've had to rebuild this map over and over again. 2000 written right there. What kind of environmental issues they have? Well, that can really be a problem as environmental issues get out of hand, and then it's hard to recoup, and especially if you're not a people that are good with the environment, it can be a real problem. Endangered species are hunted for human consumption as bushmeat in Liberia. Yeah, they'll eat all kinds of things, believe it or not. It's kind of like hillbillies, and they'll eat squirrels and so on. But listen to this. Species hunted for food in Liberia include elephants, pygmy hippopotamus, chimpanzees, leopards, duikers, and duiker is the special little deer kind of antelope thing. Duiker? Yeah, it's a little bitty deer kind of thing. And they have one that's even a little smaller and funny looking that's called a dik-dik. I always make fun of it whenever we go to the zoo and stuff, but they have some here. And anyhow, so, and they eat the duikers, and they also eat monkeys. Bushmeat is often exported to neighboring Sierra Leone and Ivory Coast because they're all loving it, despite a ban on the cross-border sale of wild animals because they're trying to stop all of it. Bushmeat is widely eaten in Liberia and considered a delicacy. A 2004 public opinion survey found that bushmeat ranks second behind fish among residents of the capital of Monrovia as a preferred source of protein. Of households where bushmeat was served, 80% of the residents said they cooked it once in a while, 13% says they cooked it at least once a week, and 7% cooked bushmeat daily. And this is when they were trying to get them to stop too, so the numbers could be much higher. The survey was conducted during the last Civil War, and bushmeat consumption is now believed to be far higher. Dun, 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 dun. And there's one of those pygmy hippos. Isn't that sad? and it's among the species illegally hunted for food. Liberia is a global biodiversity hotspot, a significant reservoir of biodiversity that is under threat from humans. Slash and burn agriculture is one of the human activities eroding Liberia's natural forest away. They're literally doing it like they did in Haiti, and they're stripping it of everything and then having problems with it afterwards. And they're overdoing it. If I can make so much a tree, let's get rid of all of them. And it's like, no, 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 no. You selectively pick some, leaving some, and let it all grow back in, and you have to do like that. Oh, that's just too much trouble. Well, this is going to be gone a couple of generations from now. Who cares? I'll be dead. Oh. Slashenberg agriculture is one of the human activities eroding Liberia's natural forest. In 2004, a UN reported estimate that 99% of Liberians burn charcoal and fuel wood for cooking and heating, resulting in deforestation. It's a major part of it, but there's others too. And that's exactly what they do in Haiti. Illegal logging has increased in